Ethan Reeves found himself on a diplomatic mission to the enigmatic planet Ilosa. As his sleek shuttle descended through the shimmering azure atmosphere, he was captivated by the sight of the alien landscape below: floating land masses tethered by pulsing energy, dense forests glowing with bioluminescent radiance, and towering crystalline spires that pierced the violet sky. Ethan's heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The Ilosan civilization had long been shrouded in mystery, their advanced technology and reclusive nature making them the subject of much speculation among the galactic community. As the diplomatic representative from the newly formed Terran Alliance, he knew the success of this mission could have far-reaching consequences. The shuttle touched down on a gleaming landing pad, and Ethan took a deep breath, straightening the lapels of his formal attire. A delegation of Ilosan officials awaited him, that emerald skin shimmering in the ethereal light. Ethan strode forward, projecting an air of confidence. "Esteemed representatives of Ilosa, I bring greetings and hopes for prosperity from the Terran Alliance," he said, bowing deeply. The lead official, a tall figure with an ornate headdress, returned the bow. "Welcome, Ambassador Reeves. We have eagerly anticipated your arrival." As they walked towards the towering palace, Ethan could sense an undercurrent of tension in the official's tone. "I trust you understand the delicate nature of these negotiations. There are factions within our government who oppose closer ties with off-worlders." Ethan nodded gravely. "I assure you, Minister, I will approach these talks with the utmost care and respect for Ilosan traditions." The minister's expression darkened. "See that you do. The wedding of Princess Lyra to General Zara has put many of our people in a celebratory mood. It would be a shame to sour the festivities with failed negotiations." Ethan's steps faltered momentarily. A wedding? He had not been informed of this. The minister noticed his reaction and offered a wry smile. "Ah, yes. The union will cement the alliance between the royal family and our military leadership. A joyous occasion indeed." As they entered the grand reception hall, Ethan found himself surrounded by a sea of emerald faces, struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire introductions and snippets of conversation. The gathered Ilosan elite regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Suddenly, the hush that fell over the crowd drew Ethan's attention to the far end of the hall. Princess Lyra glided into the room, her life form draped in shimmering fabric that seemed to capture and reflect the bioluminescent glow of the palace itself. But it was her eyes that truly mesmerized Ethan, vertical pupils set in irises of swirling gold and green. Their gazes locked, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded away. Ethan felt a jolt of recognition, a connection he couldn't name that left him breathless. The spell was broken as a broad-shouldered Ilosan in military dress strode to Lyra's side, placing a possessive hand on her lower back. "General Zara," Ethan presumed. The general's eyes narrowed as he noticed Ethan's lingering gaze. Ethan quickly averted his eyes, cursing himself for his lapse in control. He was here as a diplomat, not to moon over an alien princess, especially one who was clearly spoken for. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, as Ethan went through the motions of small talk and preliminary negotiations, his thoughts constantly drifting back to that brief moment of connection with Lyra. It was well past midnight when Ethan finally retired to his quarters, but sleep eluded him. As he tossed and turned, his mind racing, he knew he needed to clear his head. Impulsively, he left his room and made his way to the palace gardens, the bioluminescent flora casting everything in an otherworldly glow. "You're up late, Ambassador." Ethan turned to see Princess Lyra regarding him with those captivating eyes. "Your Highness," he said, bowing hastily. "I apologize if I'm intruding." Lyra raised a hand. "Please, there's no need for such formalities here. I come to these gardens to escape the weight of titles and expectations. I'd ask that you do the same." Ethan straightened, studying her face. There was a wariness in her eyes that he hadn't noticed from across the reception hall. "As you wish, Lyra," he said, finding himself returning her small smile. "Though I confess, I'm not sure how to address an alien princess as anything other than Your Highness. Lyra's smile widened. And I'm not sure how to address an alien ambassador as anything other than ambassador. Perhaps we can simply use our names and pretend, for a moment, that we're just two people enjoying a nighttime stroll. They walked in companionable silence for a time, the soft glow of the gardens enveloping them. Finally, Lyra spoke. What brings you to our world, Ethan? Beyond the official reason, I mean. Ethan considered his words carefully. Curiosity, I suppose. A desire to bridge the gap between our peoples, to understand. Lyra nodded. A noble goal, but often an elusive one. Even among our own kind, true understanding can be challenging. There was a weight to her words that Ethan couldn't ignore. You speak from experience, he prompted gently. Lyra sighed, her gaze distant. Let's just say that the expectations placed upon a princess don't always align with one's own desires. Ethan's mind flashed to General Zara, to the impending wedding. He chose his next words carefully. I imagine such a position comes with many obligations. Obligations, Lyra repeated, a bitter edge to her voice. Yes, that's one way to put it. Duty, sacrifice, the needs of the many outweighing the desires of the one. Pretty words to dress up an ugly truth. She fell silent, and Ethan sensed he was treading on dangerous ground, but something compelled him to press further. And what is that truth, Lyra? Lyra met his gaze, and the intensity he saw there took his breath away. That I am to be bartered away like a prize animal, my future decided by men who see me as nothing more than a means to consolidate their power. The raw pain in her voice stirred something in Ethan. Before he could stop himself, he reached out, placing a hand on her arm. Lyra, I'm so sorry. But Lyra jerked away, as if burned. I shouldn't have said that. Please forget I. She turned and fled, her form melting into the shadows of the garden. Ethan was left alone, his hands still outstretched, the phantom warmth of her skin lingering on his fingertips. In the days that followed, Ethan threw himself into the trade negotiations, desperate to distract himself from thoughts of Lyra. But everywhere he turned, reminders of her impending wedding to General Zara loomed large. He caught glimpses of her at official functions, always flanked by stern-faced guards or accompanied by her imposing fiancé. The spark he'd seen in her eyes that night in the garden was conspicuously absent, replaced by a carefully neutral mask. It was during one particularly tense round of discussions that Ethan's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. The terms you propose are insulting, General Zara growled, looming over the negotiating table. You would have us open our world to your merchants while offering nothing of value in return. Ethan fought to keep his voice level. With all due respect, General, I believe you're misinterpreting. I interpret nothing, Zara snapped, slamming his fist on the table. I see only an off-worlder attempting to exploit our people's hospitality. These talks are over. As the general stormed out, Ethan caught sight of Lyra watching from a balcony above. Their eyes met for a brief moment before she turned away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan once again found himself wandering the palace gardens. He wasn't entirely surprised when Lyra materialized from the shadows, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. I was hoping I'd find you here, she said softly. Ethan's heart raced, but he forced his voice to remain steady. I'm glad you did, Lyra. About what happened in the negotiations. Lyra shook her head. That's not why I'm here. Ethan, I need to tell you something. Something that could change everything. The intensity in her eyes made Ethan shiver. What is it, Lyra? Lyra took a deep breath. My people have a gift, a biological ability that's been kept secret from off-worlders for generations. We call it the symbiosis. Ethan's brow furrowed. I don't understand. It's difficult to explain, Lyra said, frustration creeping into her voice. When we form a deep connection with another being, we can merge our energies, enhance each other's abilities. It's more than physical, It's a joining of minds and souls. Ethan's mind reeled at the implications. And this symbiosis, it's why your marriage to Zara is so important. Lyra nodded, her expression pained. The military elite believe that by controlling who I bond with, they can harness the power of the symbiosis for their own ends. But they don't understand. It can't be forced. It has to be. Has to be what? Ethan prompted gently. Lyra met his gaze, vulnerability shining in her eyes. Born of true connection, of love. The word hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Ethan swallowed hard. Lyra, I. But before he could finish the thought, Lyra closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a passionate kiss. Ethan felt a jolt of energy course through him, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Their bond deepened, a symbiotic union of body, mind, and soul. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Lyra's eyes were wide with wonder and a hint of fear. That was the beginning of a symbiosis, she whispered. Ethan struggled to find the words. I've never felt anything like that before with anyone. He shook his head, the implications crashing over him like a wave. This changes everything. The negotiations, the wedding, the future of two worlds. What do we do now? Lyra's expression hardened with resolve. Now we fight for our future, together. As the first rays of Salosa's alien sun began to paint the sky, Ethan knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but with Lyra by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The dawn light of Salosa's alien sun had barely had time to warm Ethan's skin before reality came crashing down. He and Lyra had shared something profound, something that defied the boundaries between their species, but the world around them hadn't changed. The impending wedding, the delicate negotiations, the fate of two worlds, all of it still loomed large. Ethan's communicator buzzed insistently, Minister Vex's voice crackling through. Ambassador, your presence is required immediately. There have been developments. Lyra's eyes widened with fear. They know, she whispered. Ethan squeezed her hand, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. We'll figure this out together. But as the days wore on, their stolen moments became increasingly rare and fraught with tension. General Zara's suspicious gaze seemed to follow Ethan everywhere, and the trade negotiations, once progressing smoothly, devolved into thinly veiled hostility. It was Lyra who first voiced the unthinkable. We have to leave, she said, her voice barely audible even in the secluded alcove where they managed to meet. Ethan's mind raced. Leave? Lyra, I'm an ambassador. I can't just. Don't you see? Lyra interrupted, her eyes blazing with intensity. This is bigger than diplomacy now. The symbiosis we shared, it's not just about us. There's a reason my people have kept it secret for so long. In the wrong hands, it could be weaponized. The implications hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Zara, the military, that's why they're so insistent on this marriage. To control the power of the symbiosis. Lyra nodded grimly. And now that we've formed a connection, they'll stop at nothing to control us. The wedding preparations accelerated at a dizzying pace, and Ethan found himself shut out of critical negotiations, relegated to ceremonial functions that felt more and more like a farce. He caught glimpses of Lyra, always surrounded by a phalanx of guards, her eyes haunted. On the eve of the ceremony, they made their decision. It wasn't just about their love anymore. It was about preventing a power that could reshape the galaxy from falling into the wrong hands. The wedding day dawned, Silosa's violet sky a mockery of celebration. Ethan, ostensibly there to represent Earth's interests, slipped away from the dignitaries, his heart pounding as he made his way to the predetermined meeting point. Lyra was there, resplendent in her ceremonial garb, but with a fierce determination in her eyes that outshone any jewelry. Are you ready? She asked. Ethan nodded, pushing down his doubts. This was treason, a violation of everything his diplomatic training had instilled in him. But as he looked at Lyra, he knew it was the only choice. They moved swiftly through the palace, Lyra's intimate knowledge of its layout proving invaluable. When they encountered guards, Ethan felt a surge of energy flow through him. Lyra was channeling her strength, enhancing his reflexes and agility through their symbiotic bond. Alarms blared as they reached the hangar bay, but Ethan's diplomatic codes, not yet revoked, granted them access. They sprinted towards a sleek vessel, clearly designed for speed and stealth. As blaster fire peppered the hull, Ethan caught a glimpse of General Zara's enraged face through the viewport before they shot into Xylos's atmosphere. "Hold on," Lyra warned, her hands flying over the controls. The stars blurred into streaks of light as they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the only world Lyra had ever known far behind. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by their heavy breathing. Then, Lyra let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "We did it," she said, turning to Ethan with wonder in her eyes. "We're free." But freedom, they quickly learned, came with its own set of challenges. Their ship, while fast, had limited supplies, and every report they approached brought the risk of recognition and capture. Ethan's diplomatic credentials were now worse than useless, a beacon to every bounty hunter in the galaxy. They narrowly escaped a team of mercenaries on a refueling station in the Outer Rim. Lyra's quick thinking and their combined abilities through the symbiosis, allowing them to turn the tables on their pursuers. But it was a close call. "We can't keep running forever," Ethan said as they huddled in the ship's small cabin, nursing their wounds. "We need a plan." Lyra's eyes lit up. "The archives," she said. "On my world, there are legends of an ancient repository of knowledge, hidden away when my people first discovered the power of the symbiosis. If we could find it, we might understand how to control this power, and maybe find a way to prove to both our peoples that it doesn't have to be a weapon." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "Then that's where we need to go." Their search led them through the darkest corners of the galaxy, trading information with shady brokers, piecing together clues from half-forgotten myths, and narrowly avoiding Xylos and patrol ships more times than they could count. Along the way, their bond deepened, and Ethan marveled at the way he could sense Lyra's emotions, anticipate her thoughts. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. In the quiet moments between adventures, they explored the limits of their symbiosis, their bodies and minds intertwined in a dance of passion and intimacy. Ethan was captivated by Lyra's every movement, every whisper and sigh, and she in turn discovered new dimensions of pleasure. Their quest led them to a remote space station on the very edge of charted space, a hive of smugglers and outlaws, the kind of place where no questions were asked as long as the credits kept flowing. "This is our last lead," Ethan said grimly as they docked. "If the archives aren't here, I don't know where else to look." Lyra squeezed his hand. "They will be, I can feel it." The station was a maze of cramped corridors and suspicious glances, but they made their way to a dingy bar where their contact, a multi-limbed alien of indeterminate species, waited. "You seek the archives," the alien rasped, its cluster of eyes blinking rapidly. "Many have, but few return." Lyra stood tall, her chin raised defiantly. "We're not afraid." The alien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You should be, child of Xylosa. The archives hold secrets your kind was not meant to know." Despite the warning, the alien provided them with coordinates to a nearby asteroid field. "There you will find your answers," it said, "and perhaps your doom." As they prepared to leave the station, an alarm suddenly blared, and a familiar voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention all personnel. The fugitives Ethan Reeves and Lyra are believed to be on this station. A substantial reward is offered for their capture alive." Lyra's face paled. "How did they find us?" Ethan's mind raced. "It doesn't matter. We need to get to that asteroid field now." They sprinted back to their ship, using every trick and shortcut they'd learned over their months on the run. Blaster fire erupted around them as Xylos and soldiers poured into the docking bay. Ethan felt a searing pain in his side as a shot grazed him, and Lyra cried out, feeling his pain through their bond. But they pushed through, scrambling into their ship and launching even as the docking clamps tried to hold them in place. The asteroid field loomed before them, a treacherous maze of spinning rocks and deadly debris. Behind them, Xylosan warships emerged from hyperspace, weapons charged. "There's no way through that," Ethan said, his voice tight with pain and fear. Lyra's eyes blazed with determination. "Together," she said, placing her hand over his on the controls. Ethan felt the familiar surge of the symbiosis, but this time it was different, stronger, more complete. His pain faded, replaced by a hyper-awareness of the ship, the asteroids, the pursuing vessels. They moved as one, the ship darting and weaving through gaps that shouldn't have existed. Behind them, explosions bloomed as their pursuers weren't so lucky. And then suddenly, they were through. A massive asteroid loomed before them, unremarkable save for a small artificial opening. "The archives," Lyra breathed. They docked, the pursuit temporarily stymied by the asteroid field. As they stepped out of their ship, Ethan felt a sense of anticipation, as if the very air was charged with potential. The entrance led to a vast chamber, filled with swirling holograms and pulsing crystals. At its center stood a pillar of light, somehow both blinding and yet possible to look at directly. "What is this place?" Ethan asked, in awe. "It's a record of every symbiotic pair in our history," Lyra said, her eyes wide. "And more than that, it's a nexus." "A nexus," Ethan repeated, as a shimmering figure emerged from the pillar of light. The figure seemed to shift between male and female, young and old, multiple species blending together. "We are the culmination of all symbiotic bonds," it said, its voice echoing with a timeless quality. "The ultimate expression of unity between beings." Ethan glanced at Lyra, then back at the figure. "And who are you?" The figure smiled. "We are the Nexus. And you," it said, looking at Ethan and Lyra with an expression of joy. "You are the fulfillment of a prophecy millennia in the making." Lyra gasped. "The prophecy? A pair whose love would change the fate of the galaxy." The figure nodded. "Your bond, a bridge between worlds, has the power to usher in a new era of understanding and cooperation, but only if you're willing to embrace your destiny fully." Ethan and Lyra exchanged a look. In that moment, no words were necessary. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to turn back now. "We're ready," they said in unison. The figure's smile widened. "Then let the true journey begin." As Ethan and Lyra stepped into the pillar of light, a surge of energy coursed through their joined hands. The chamber around them dissolved into a kaleidoscope of memories and knowledge, centuries of symbiotic experiences flooding their consciousness. When the light faded, they found themselves changed, not physically, but with a profound understanding of their bond and its potential. The figure that had greeted them was gone, but its final words echoed in their minds. "You are the key to a new era. Use your power wisely." For weeks, Ethan and Lyra immersed themselves in the secrets of the archives, marveling at the depth of Lyra's people's history and the sacrifices made to keep the symbiosis hidden. Together, they practiced channeling their energy, pushing the boundaries of what their connection could achieve. They knew they had very little time to study the archives before they would be found, but their sanctuary couldn't last forever. The proximity alarm blared, shattering their concentration. Ethan's stomach dropped as he checked the sensors. "No," he breathed. "How did they find us?" Lyra's face paled as she saw the readings. "It's not just a search party. That's the entire Xylosan fleet." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing General Zara's face, twisted with a mixture of triumph and barely contained rage. "Ambassador Reeves, Princess Lyra," Zara sneered. "Your little escapade ends now. Surrender, or we will reduce this pathetic rock to atoms." Ethan's mind raced. They'd known this confrontation was coming, but not so soon, not before they'd fully mastered their abilities. He glanced at Lyra, saw the determination in her eyes that matched his own. No more running, she said, already moving towards the communication array. We need to evacuate the station. Belay that order, Zara barked. Anyone who harbored you traitors will face the consequences. You have 1 hour to surrender yourselves, or we open fire. The transmission cut off, and Ethan's fist clenched. He's bluffing. He wouldn't risk destroying the archives. Lyra shook her head grimly. You don't know Zara like I do. His pride, his need for control, it outweighs everything else. He'd burn the galaxy to get what he wants. Ethan met her gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. Then we give him what he wants. Us. They worked feverishly, using the station's systems to broadcast an evacuation order to all non-essential personnel. As the last escape pods launched, Ethan and Lyra made their final preparations. Remember, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fear Ethan could feel thrumming through their bond. We're stronger together, no matter what happens. Ethan silenced her with a fierce kiss, then nodded. Together, they stepped out onto the station's main docking bay just as Zara's shuttle touched down. The general emerged, flanked by a squad of heavily armed soldiers, his eyes locking onto Lyra with a possessive gleam that made Ethan's blood boil. So, the prodigal princess returns, Zara sneered. I hope your little adventure was worth throwing away everything. Your duty, your people, your future. Lyra stood tall, her voice ringing with an authority Ethan had never heard before. The only future I'm throwing away is the one where you use our gifts as a weapon, Zara. The symbiosis was never meant for war. Zara's face contorted with rage. You naive child. The galaxy is war. Power is the only currency that matters, and you would squander it on what? Love. He spat the word like a curse. Ethan stepped forward, his own voice infused with the weight of the symbiosis. Not just love, Zara. Understanding, cooperation, the chance for something greater than endless conflict. The general's hand moved to his weapon. I've heard enough of this. He barked an order to his men. Secure the princess. Kill the human. Time seemed to slow as the soldiers raised their weapons. Ethan felt Lyra's energy surge through him, amplifying his own, and a shimmering barrier sprang to life around them. Blaster fire ricocheted harmlessly off the shield. Zara's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. Lyra's voice was calm, but Ethan could feel the strain of maintaining their defense. Stand down, Zara. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. But the general was beyond reason. All ships, open fire, he screamed into his communicator. Destroy this station and everyone on it. The deck shuddered as the first volley struck. Ethan gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his being into strengthening their shield. He could feel Lyra doing the same, their energies intertwining in ways that defied explanation. Through their bond, a plan formed, not with words, but with pure intention and shared purpose. Ethan nodded imperceptibly. This was their one shot. As Zara's fleet intensified their barrage, Ethan and Lyra's shield began to expand. It grew outward, enveloping not just them, but the entire docking bay. Zara and his men found themselves trapped within the shimmering barrier. What is this? The general snarled, firing uselessly at the energy field. What have you done? Lyra's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. We are showing you the true power of the symbiosis, Zara, not as a weapon, but as a force of creation and protection. The shield continued to grow, extending beyond the station itself. Ethan felt a moment of vertigo as their awareness expanded with it. With a thought, they disabled the fleet's weapons and engines, communication arrays going dark. In the space of a heartbeat, the mighty armada was reduced to floating hunks of metal. Zara's face had lost all color. This is impossible. Ethan's voice echoed with the same timeless quality as Lyra's. No, Zara. This is what happens when two beings achieve true harmony, when they set aside fear and embrace understanding. The general's shoulders sagged in defeat. What now? He asked, all bravado gone. Lyra turned to address the stunned soldiers. you've seen what we can do. But this power isn't meant for one race or one world. It's meant to bring people together, to heal the rifts between us. Ethan continued, feeling Lyra's thoughts as clearly as his own. We offer you a choice. Continue down the path of destruction and isolation, or join us in building something new. A galaxy where cooperation replaces conflict, where diversity is celebrated instead of feared. One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. Even Zara, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, seemed to deflate. Tentatively, he reached out, and as his hand touched the energy field, it pulsed with a wave of understanding. In the days that followed, news of what had transpired spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The archives, no longer hidden, became a beacon of knowledge and healing. Diplomats and leaders from countless worlds came, seeking to understand the power of the symbiosis. Ethan and Lyra found themselves at the center of a revolution, not one of violence, but of hearts and minds. Their bond, once seen as a threat, became a symbol of hope. As they stood on the observation deck of the station, watching ships from 100 different species dock, Ethan felt a sense of awe. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" he asked Lyra. She smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "Honestly, no. But then again, I never imagined I'd fall in love with an alien diplomat either." Ethan chuckled. Life's full of surprises. A familiar voice spoke behind them. "Indeed it is." Ethan and Lyra turned to see General Zara. No, just Zara now, having renounced his military title. "The Xylosan High Council has approved the proposal for an interspecies exchange program. We'll be welcoming our first group of human students next month." Lyra beamed. "That's wonderful news." Zara nodded, a hint of his old briskness still present. "Yes, well, there's still much work to be done. Centuries of mistrust and isolationism don't vanish overnight." His expression softened slightly. "But we're on the right path." As Zara excused himself, Ethan pulled Lyra close. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I took this diplomatic posting, I thought the best I could hope for was avoiding an interplanetary incident. I never dreamed I'd help reshape the galaxy." Lyra's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Are you saying I'm more trouble than you bargained for, Ambassador Reeves?" Ethan laughed, touching his forehead to hers. "My dear, you're the best kind of trouble there is." He let her feel the depth of his love, his gratitude, his excitement for their shared future. As they turned back to the viewport, watching the stars shimmer with possibility, Ethan knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced everything else, together, two hearts beating as one, reaching for the infinite potential of the universe. In the weeks and months that followed, Ethan and Lyra's efforts to bridge the divide between their peoples gained momentum, fueled by the profound connection they shared through the symbiosis. The ancient archives, once a closely guarded secret, now stood as a beacon of knowledge and understanding, drawing diplomats, scientists, and curious minds from across the galaxy. Under their guidance, the Xylosan High Council and the Terran Alliance forged a new alliance, one built on mutual respect and a shared vision for a future where cooperation and cultural exchange replaced centuries of isolation and mistrust. Ethan marveled at how seamlessly he and Lyra navigated these delicate negotiations, their symbiotic bond granting them an almost preternatural intuition into the needs and concerns of both parties. As the first wave of human students arrived on Tylosa, eager to immerse themselves in the wonders of the alien civilization, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The young diplomatic envoy who had once been overwhelmed by the dazzling sights and enigmatic customs of this world now walked its gleaming streets with a sense of belonging, a deep appreciation for the depth and complexity of Thylosan culture. Lyra, too, had undergone a profound transformation. The weight of her royal obligations and the constraints of her expected role had once threatened to crush her spirit, but now she radiated a confidence and purpose that inspired all who encountered her. Together, they had not only freed themselves from the confines of tradition and duty, but had become the architects of a new era, one where the divide between their species was bridged by understanding and shared experience. The symbiosis they shared remained a source of wonder and fascination, but it was no longer a closely guarded secret. Instead, it had become a model for what could be achieved when two beings, regardless of their origins, opened themselves to the possibilities of true connection. Finn and Nira presided over the official opening of the Terran Cultural Exchange Center, a gleaming facility dedicated to facilitating research, educational programs, and social integration between the two worlds. As they stood side by side, flanked by dignitaries and curious onlookers, Finn felt a profound sense of pride and fulfillment. "Who would have thought," he murmured to Nira, "that a chance diplomatic mission would lead us here?" Lyra's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Certainly not the young, wide-eyed ambassador I first encountered in the palace gardens." She gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "But then again, you always did have a knack for the unexpected." Finn chuckled, pulling her close. "And you, my dear, have a remarkable talent for turning my world upside down in the best possible way." As the ceremony unfolded, Finn and Nira found themselves drawn into a whirlwind of activity. They answered questions, offered insights, and gladly shared the story of their symbiotic bond, inspiring awe and wonder in all who heard it. For Finn, it was a far cry from the carefully scripted diplomatic functions he had once endured, and he embraced the lively exchange of ideas and perspectives with genuine enthusiasm. In the quiet moments they managed to steal away, Finn and Nira would retreat to the palace gardens, the familiar bioluminescent glow casting a serene atmosphere around them. It was here, amidst the whispering flora and the gentle pulse of the symbiotic nexus, that they would reflect on their journey, their hopes for the future, and the profound changes that had reshaped not only their own lives, but the course of two worlds. "Do you ever wonder," Nira said softly, as they strolled hand in hand, "what might have happened if we had never met that fateful night?" Finn considered her question, his fingers tracing the delicate lines of her palm. "I confess, I try not to dwell on such hypotheticals. Our path has been arduous, to be sure, but look at what we've accomplished, what we continue to build together." Nira nodded, her expression contemplative. "You're right. And yet, I can't help but feel a sense of wonder at the sheer improbability of it all. A human diplomat and an alien princess, defying expectations and forging a bond that would reshape the galaxy." "A bond that was always meant to be," Finn murmured, pulling her into a warm embrace. "Our symbiosis wasn't just a chance occurrence, Nira, it was destiny, written in the stars long before we were born." Nira rested her head against his chest, her words muffled by the fabric of his tunic. "Then I'm grateful for the path that led us here, for the trials we've endured, and the future we now have the privilege to build." They stood there, lost in the tranquility of the moment, the weight of their responsibilities momentarily lifted. In this oasis of serenity, Finn and Nira found the strength to face whatever challenges awaited them, secure in the knowledge that their bond, forged in the crucible of adversity and nurtured by a shared vision of a better tomorrow, would guide them through. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of violet and gold, Finn and Nira reluctantly parted, knowing that the work of this new era was far from over. But with each step they took, hand in hand, they knew that the future they were shaping would be one of endless possibilities, a testament to the transformative power of understanding, connection, and the boundless potential of the human spirit.